so I know there was a lot there. I'll try and field questions you have, and Sam jump into and see what I can do. Ryan.
I want to use the paper up here and just sketch something on it. I just want to ask for clarification on the model. So if the existing tide gates are here, river is flowing this way, so the existing condition is pretty clear that the tide gates are here. You know, this crosstalk that you showed in the model, depending on, that's how the model looked at it, is this drainage structure here. But for, let's just say that 18-foot contour alternative, where theoretically this is the 18-foot existing contour, and that there's now a setback levee there. So for the scenario where you're keeping the existing tide gates, are you assuming that it's still in the same location, or are you just assuming the same function but relocated to that setback levee?
The location didn't change.
So then, how is this exchange modeled?
Are those the four, is that one of the four tributaries that are coming in?
No, this is the bathtub.
Yeah, I have a similar question about that.
So now your bathtub has a smaller section that's, so if you leave the existing tide gates here, this is still happening. But with the setback levee, there's got to be some way for water to pass through it.
Right.
So that's really clarification is how that is.
So make sure I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I.
So if a ring levee is built here, and rainfall happens on this parcel right here, where does this water go? How does this water get accounted for?
So,
And the tributaries too. Yeah, sure is. Just they come in before that.
Okay.
so there's our plumbing for the most part.
Okay.
Right, so we've got 4 tribs flowing north. They all flow in this channel out to the river.
So what the model does outside of the ring levee, the model doesn't speak to how this water flows, right? So all those water surface elevations I'm reporting, their values inside of here. What happens to drainage out here that's not a part of the bathtub is surface drainage that is not a part of this, right? So what happens to this actually? Like, where does this water go? I don't know. The model's not saying. Like
This is part of the teacher work.
Would you say that's part of, you said it's a feasibility analysis, and that the sort of levees are more conceptual and preliminary designs, and so that's
just
something
go to this schematic here. So the model is accounting for rainfall and runoff in this red area and in all these trips that are upstream. So all the land use here, all the water that's happening here gets running down and getting into the bucket of water. But if a ring levee is built and it cuts through here, the model's not speaking to where the rainfall right here is going. Like that's a level of detail that this model doesn't speak to.
And I think to clarify, the only creek that lies outside the 18-foot or the 14-foot contour is the Canyon Creek. And I thought, when I remember reading your study, which I didn't bring, that you talked briefly about there might be backup at that area where the Canyon Creek hits the ring levee.
I think we
Around
got,
Chief Flushout.
I think we got a schematic to show you.
There is another creek that goes from Andy Norwitz, that comes off the hill to the canyon, a large creek that doesn't have a name, it goes into that whole creek system too. And it's probably 400 or 500 gallons a minute coming out of there right today.
This schematic right here, this locator map, is showing where these 4 trips coming down and they intersect. And in the report, there was a closer look at what that actually looks like. So this is Squally Creek coming down, and I think this is the feasibility extent of where the levee would be. And so here is where the water is coming into the levee here, and there's going to be a question as to what does this look like here? How does that change? Or if the water surface increases inside the bathtub, how far up does that increase have an impact? And from what I recall from the report, it was Swan, Squally, and Clear that had lesser impacts that looked outside of this intersection here, but Canyon Creek had more impacts. What exactly that looked like, again, I just want to say it's this was a feasibility study, and certainly what that connection looks like in the details, it doesn't exist yet. But that would be something that would absolutely have to be understood better as it moves forward. Tom?
Yeah. On your scenario with the bridge, how wide an opening were you using for that scenario?
How wide?
Yeah.
I don't remember how wide, but we just assumed that the Clear Creek itself, the channel, was unrestricted. It didn't restrict.
So basically where the gates are now, just removing everything and putting the bridge over it.
Do you recall, Sam?
Well, we cut a cross section from the LiDAR, and we built a small RAS model. Just make some assumptions about the cross section and developed a rating curve from that. So it would have been, the span of the bridge would have been the same width as the existing channel.
It's so
So it would have, I think we looked at the LiDAR on the
Clear Creek side.
Clear Creek side, whatever that span of the channel was, and then made a little separate computer model, a HEC-RAS computer model, as if there were those channel sections all the way through there, and used that to determine resistance to flow coming in and out. So there was no restriction via a bridge or a culvert, it was just an open channel.
So those 2 gates basically proved out to be correct, the correct size for the amount of water that needs to get through, the amount of time that it does have for tidal level and stuff.
Say that one more time?
The gates, they're 2 6-foot gates.
Yes.
You was one, then you put the second one in, then are large enough to compensate when these, we have these heavy rains.
Oh, I don't know how to answer that. They're large, they compensate for it. We reported the impact that the gates have, but didn't speak to the sufficiency or insufficiency of the gates. Just what impact they're having. So the impact they're having can be evaluated against changes to the system, but we weren't trying to evaluate how well or poorly they are functioning.
How they come up with 6-foot gate then? I mean, something had to be engineered to come up with 6-foot gate.
Port of Tacoma.
Oh, so I think as a Port of Tacoma design, back, you probably know better than I do when that went in. How was that established?
Well, there was a 6-foot, and then they put a 6-foot alongside of the 6-foot. They must have had some reason for picking 6 foot. The second time, I think they just copied the first one. The first one was put in 1932. I mean, it doesn't seem to me that any of it's ever been proved out.
Right.
That's the reason that when you have a larger event, it takes 2 weeks for the water to go away because you got 18 trillion gallons of water is backed up.
So Lauren, I think you're right, there are really a lot of questions about the tide gates and what, how they function and if they're the adequate size. So I think this model doesn't look at that. I think we'll be talking later about something ESA is proposing for the next space to try and get at some answers about the tide
That's
gates.
kind of what my point is.
Yeah.
This model not looking at that.
Well, for larger events, we do look at that. I mean, if you look at this slide here, I mean, this is an open bridge, for this bar graph here. So you've basically got as large an opening as, is realistic based on the existing channel. It's really very similar to if you just took two of the existing 6 foot by 6 foot, box culverts. You can see that the 100-year stage is very similar between the two. You can also see that the 10 years is fairly similar. So I mean, the existing 6 foot culverts aren't necessarily, you don't necessarily get that much more benefit with going to a much larger opening. So you probably see some differences in duration, but in terms of the peak stage, it's not.
Curve flattens out.
Yeah, the curve flattens out.
The 50-year and the 100-year, the same elevation.
So you said the study though, basically started in 61 as hour by hour.
Yes.
61 to 2012. There's got to be some big difference in there then because that second gate wasn't put in until 2009.
Well, the model has the same conditions for that 50-year period. So it doesn't know that the conditions changed in the middle. It just says whatever conditions you're modeling, which are what's out there today, we put that in 1961 so that we can have a consistent, a homogeneous data set that's speaking to the same operations that are happening through there. So put that in for the 50 years and what sort of an outcome would it be? And it's not mixing changes that actually occurred when you know that they occurred. So that way you're able to compare a condition to a condition and not having this one condition changing partway through. Now what may be of interest, Lauren, was to have the condition that was there in 1961, have that there for 50 years. And the condition that's there today, which is what we modeled, have that there for 50 years. And then you could look at the difference between those and see, but that way you have a homogeneous data set that you can see what's happening for those 50 years and your statistics are meaningful.
Floodgates also prevent the Fjord River flowing back. Is that included? Is that factored in here as well? So without that, that'd be, I think, a significant factor that I don't really see here.
That's the two open culverts, isn't it? So you model the open culverts as if they're the same culverts, but just no tide gates on them, and you compare that to the existing outlet condition. Those two things, just kind of see what's the difference in the elevation in the Clear Creek area between no tide gates or what's existing right now with the tide gates operating.
So that, Hans, you're speaking to a 10-year stage, the water surface in this bathtub that's expected to achieve once every 10 years, increasing from 17 to 18 and a half if you remove those gates. But the impact of those gates, as the floods become less frequent and larger in duration, they have less impact, as they have less impact as the storms get further. The gates are more impactful at the more frequent events.
So, Chris, just to clarify, this is only showing the peak stage of the water. It's not showing the duration that the water would be at that peak stage.
This plot does not.
But you also said you don't have duration, or you did.
Yeah, that's exhibit 6 in the original. We had the stage duration plots.
So this plot here, which I didn't spend as much time describing as the other one, is the one that's speaking to the amount of time in hours per year across the top axis there, or for frequency, versus the stage. So, this is showing 16 feet of elevation on average in any given year is expected to happen for 10 hours on any given year, right? And these durations change as the volume and as the outlet conditions change. And I didn't speak a lot to them today, but they're in the table.
Could you summarize, if you could, the modeling results for the effective duration from an open culvert or an open outlet?
If I'd have done the study recently, I could. It's been a year. I don't remember, honestly. It's in the report. I don't know if we could look, but I didn't present it here, and I just don't have it at the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, just want to follow up on that. Just trying to get a good feel for the opening without a bridge, with a bridge. And correct me if I'm wrong, but right now, you said it was size for the channel of the stream. Isn't that a factor of how much water comes in, and it's intertidal, right? So water comes in, water goes out. If the opening isn't big enough to let the amount of water come in that it could, then is the channel going to be smaller? In other words, so I guess what I'm curious is what would be the channel size out there that you needed to have unmitigated or just water come in and out as if it would naturally? How big an opening would that need to be?
To be clear, we did not look at that, but I think that is something that would be of interest. In other words, what is the geomorphically affected flow, and what is the material there that the banks are made of, and what is that equilibrium width that the channel could be expected to operate at? That's a study. That's a separate study, but sure.
So you couldn't take drainage into account for lack of information, but could you estimate what kind of impact you think having drastically improved drainage might have on that one that compared to the bar graph?
Go to the bar graphs.
Either of these, how much of a difference do you think amazing drainage would make on these graphs?
Okay. When you say the drainage, you're talking about drainage from intra-field drainage.
Yes.
So we were talking about drainage that lands outside of the berm on the flat already, right? It's not coming from an upland source. It's already on flat. And how that then passes through the levee, right? That's what we're asking about?
Well,
I thought they were asking if like the existing drainage system was maintained and got up to working really well. How much would that affect these water surface elevations?
Well, I don't know if my answer is going to be satisfying, but let me tell you what the model speaks to. Because all of the fields that are out there that are connected via drainage networks, those that are within the ring of the levee that we evaluated as one tub, right? One tub of water, and you have different fields that are connected, and they're truly separated and have different ways of getting routing water from one another. All the model knows is that there's a volume available for it to put a packet of water in. And so what that means, as you think about it, is the how do I say it? It's operating as if the model thinks that the conveyance through the fields from one field to the other is operating as well as it could, right? Because it says it's all right here, and it doesn't realize that it's having a hard time getting from here to here to here to get into this. The model doesn't know that; it just knows it's all here. So this model is speaking as if everything is hydraulically efficient as it can be. Now that may not exist. That may not. It's not as hydraulically as efficient as it can be. I'm hearing that. But at the level that we looked at this when we first cracked this open, The model can't speak to that right now. You could tease that out, doing what I was saying earlier, as you subdivide the basin a little bit, right? So instead of having one basin, you have 5 basins. Or maybe there's 25 basins. And all those are connected via some sort of routing. And the routing from basin 1 to 2 to 3 to 25 is more or less efficient depending on what's actually out there, right? You can tease that out. You can build a model instead of one basin's got 25 and they're all connected, and you can do that. What it requires is on-the-ground information of how does water convey from field 1 to field 2, and field 2 to field 3, and field 2 to field 5, and field 2 to field 7. And you build that network in there, and then you can improve the drainage from 2 to 7, or from 1 to 5, or wherever, and you can see what difference it makes. And you can imagine that what we looked at was just 12 solutions. Depending on the number of basins, those solutions, you can get lost in them, but you can do it.
Could I ask again about the width? This is a Tom's question earlier, and I just wanted to follow up about the width of the unrestricted channel from the constructed from the LiDAR for what you modeled for an unrestricted outlet. Do you have an idea of what that was? 20 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet?
I don't.
The reason I asked is Helmut had mentioned previously old oblique photographs that show an opening of in the order of 100 or 120 feet. And for 2 of the project benefits, sand recovery and ecosystem benefits, we presume that the fisheries that wider outlets serves those goals better. And I'm just curious, there's historical evidence for 120 feet, and what was really intriguing to me about the report is that there is so little change in the large-scale flood stages from having a levee at 14 feet versus 18 feet. But one of the things that's come up in these forums before is, what about the opening? There's a lot of questions about that. I'm just curious, it's not in the report, I'm just curious if you could say the rough scale of the model.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but I think what we did is we looked at the 2010 LiDAR, and we looked upstream of the outlet, and there was, within the topo that you see out there today, there's a clearly defined width, and we took that width, whatever that was. So it would have been whatever was represented in the 2010 LiDAR. We didn't look back at a historical condition, and we just took that and again built a little model of an open channel at that condition. And that's what it reflects.
I can speak a little bit of that historic condition, because don't forget the river was routed. It was an oxbow that went through there. So all those creeks pretty much separately join the Puyallup River at a bend down there. So the pictures we've seen is where they left the old channel in place and then the canal intersected. That connection was over 100 feet wide. So some of the work we're going to be doing is there's a confine there, there's a parameter of how many feet per second do you want that water to flow through that gap for best habitat for fish. I don't know what that is. It's something like a 1 foot per second or something. And that, so we figured how much water is in there, how do we achieve that velocity, and that'll help size that opening. We don't know that yet. So that's also way down the road.
You have in your modeling telling all the complicated things that are going on the existing outlet condition. Gates opening at this elevation, gates closing at this elevation. And it also assumes that the flat gate is working as it was designed, doesn't have anything jammed in it. Model has to make a lot of different calculations because it's telling the elevation in the creek, it's telling the elevation outside in the river, it's modeling what these gates are doing at that time. Is there a lot of confidence in that, or is it a lot of variables that, boy, something could be off and your flow would change?
Well, I'll answer it, and Sam, you correct me. So really, I think the confidence is pretty high insofar as if the model knows, if you're telling the model with high degree of precision what the Puyallup River stage is and what the Clear Creek stage is, it's very clear the rules of operations, where the gates should be at that moment in time, and then the conveyance through them is a function of the difference in head, right? And then you have a size of an opening, and there's curves that describe the resistance for those different openings, and that's all. I mean, that's hydraulics, structure hydraulics with pretty well defined curves. So as long as you're telling the model what those stages are on either side, I think the model will do a good job of routing the flow whichever way it needs to go. But I would have less confidence in making, exactly what those stages are. That if you're saying, hey, what are you more confident or less confident in? I'm more confident in how it routes the flow between there. I would have less into knowing exactly what the stage is on either side at every hour of the time.
I think one of my things that brings to mind is we're still trying to fully understand the operating parameters on the gate and at what elevations it gets triggered and stuff. But you already have to have some of that information inputted into the model to tell it, okay, if Puyallup River's up this high, this gate closes.
It's Fortran code that is reading what it is and what it's supposed to be and routing appropriately.
So, that being said, is this existing outlet what's really existing with all the broken and not working and it's wide open sometimes, it's jammed shut with logs? So we don't even have what existing if everything was functioning, correct?
If the system isn't operating according to the rules, if there are, and surely there are, changes that happen because something is broken or something gets jammed or whatever, if the model does not reflect that.
Okay, so yeah, it would be nice to have one of these showing if everything will work correctly.
That is the existing.
That's what it is.
That is the existing.
Would there be another one that says
Right.
So we don't know then, okay,
It was
what's the
not
real
working.
existing?
That's so hard because you're right. You're absolutely right. That would be great to see. The complication with that comes in. I don't know. Look at this slide right here. This point right here is representing the stage that was reached in January 9th, 1990. But let's just say on January 9th, 1990, the gate wasn't operating for some reason. But the gate was operating correctly on all these other events in 1974 and 1967. But then, I don't know, something else happened. The screw gate quit working in February 1996. Well, then it, knowing those is nigh impossible. And then it's not consistent from alternative. So like I was saying before, you want to be able to compare a homogeneous data set so that when you compare one condition to another, you know that the difference between those is truly a function of the changes that you made and not variables that are just real life variables that happen.
Brian, if you go back to the bar chart though, I think, sort of the worst case scenarios are bracketed. So let's say, for example, you've got both tight gates with stuff in them. So your worst case is 2 open culverts, right? So letting all the water back in. On the flip side, if they work fine, say on the front end of the flood, but then one just wouldn't open afterwards, the one slide gated culvert might somewhat represent that condition. So I think even though you've got all these different permutations of how the system might misfunction, I think these scenarios bracket what we might expect.
So I think we have time for one more. I think we have to get them specifically from the farmers, so maybe just a couple minutes for us. Sure. I think a lot of us are either living or farming between 14 and 18 feet elevation. So what we are most interested in from a practical year-to-year perspective is kind of this blue area, which is the 5 to 10 year or almost just the every year most typical scenario how often water will be at between 14 and 18 feet. So we're seeing a pretty obvious, if we open the culverts and allow the river in, or if we just have the open bridge, we're going to see water more frequently above 17 feet, definitely above 16 feet, etc. And so for the farmers, it's really important to know, well, how often are fields that we are working going to be underwater compared to existing conditions? We already know that typically it's only every 5 or 10 years that we would have water on any of these fields. With the change of removing the gates, which is the goal, which is one of the goals of the proposed project, these fields are going to be covered more frequently. It sounds like you guys already have the data to tell us on a typical year how many times these fields would actually be underwater. And I know, you showed us the graph, but it hasn't been put in a format that would actually show us how many times this would be underwater in a typical year. Correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you kind of have that data.
It exists, the model has it, but because the origin of this model was for a flood insurance study, it's set up to speak clearly to the larger events, and it's not geared to speak very well. Does it exist? Can I tell you what it is? Yes, I could, but my confidence in it isn't as high as it is for the more frequent events. And so I understand that's probably more important to you than is the less frequent events. It's just that this model wasn't geared to answer that very well. The other component that I think would be of interest to you, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I may be, what is hidden here, what you're not seeing is when during the year is this flood happening? When in the year is that flood happening? If that flood is happening in October, it may, for all I know, it means nothing to you, or it means a tremendous amount to you. Or if it's happening in April, then it means something else. And I think that that's something that I have thought would be of great interest, and the only way that can be teased out is through input of what's important and what's not important, and then make these charts that speak that language so that you can evaluate it for what's important to you.
Yeah, the time of year is very important. And then the second question is, could you show the 14-foot one more time? Okay. So it looks like the proposed berm from Pierce County is 23 feet elevation, protecting those behind it from waters going over the berm. So it looks like only in one of these scenarios, even at the 14-foot, water would go over a 23-foot berm. That would be the one side scenario in a 100-year event. All of us who have homes that would be on the other side of a berm that was built are obviously concerned about water that would go over top that berm. So that berm is being built to protect those homes. So it sounded I'm just clarifying to make sure that everyone that I'm right, that the 14-foot berm is just as effective as the 18-foot berm in terms of holding the water back, even in a 100-year flood event. The water is going to stay behind that, even in the worst case scenario. Well, that's what this is showing here.
Yeah, the project would be, Hans, maybe you can speak to this, but whatever levee is constructed, it's going to be constructed to be sufficient for whatever is expected, and the berm isn't just going to be at the top of a 100-year. It's going to have some sort of a safety or freeboard above that, and I think the job is regulated to even different level of service than other areas. So, but the sufficiency of the levee isn't going to change.
How high? That's a conversation that, in my mind, it's still going to happen by getting input from the community here. To what level of protection are we wanting to build? Because as I'm hearing, at some time people are concerned with the height of this berm and how high it's going to look and how it's going to look to their community. Of course, a higher berm provides a higher level of flood protection, so the community gets some choice in that. What level are we wanting for this berm? You do normally build levees to a 100-year level of protection. The The lower Puyallup actually has a policy in place to build a 200-year level of protection. And would that extend to the Clear Creek area that is directly connected to the Puyallup River? We can talk about that. But I do see it as kind of a give and take, and so we try to show the options the community has in front of them.
And then finally, I appreciate you giving us time as well to have some input. Could you go back to a map of the drainage area with the creeks coming in? Yeah, that's great. So what the members of the local community have been asking is for a smaller berm than even the 14-foot contour. And so I know you guys didn't model it, but we're asking, just generally asking about the feasibility of, rather than following the contour, if the berm just stops before it reached where most of us live and farm. Obviously, we would have a potential issue with when the water draining here hits that berm, it might back up. Okay, but in terms of holding the water from the Puyallup coming in, you haven't modeled that, but I mean, it obviously would fill up faster, but it wouldn't necessarily go higher than the Puyallup itself, right? Or could it?
It's gonna, you would expect it to follow the same trend of the statistics when, from the 18-foot to the 14-foot to something smaller. The story that's being told is what the bar chart showed there, that there's less available storage, and so stages are going to be higher more often at the more frequent events.
Right, they'll be higher more often, but they might not go like way above.
Yeah, I mean, there's a limit.
There's a limit to how high it could go.
So, right.
As long as you know what's the levee would possibly have to be higher if the area within the levee is small.
Well, it was higher for the more frequent events, but not much change for the more significant.
There was
less
less
frequent.
change at the peak. Tom?
Yeah, so the data or the models are based off the past 50 years. And I think probably what's important to everybody is the next 50 years. Can you look at data that way too and project, sea level rise and more rain and everything else that's expected and see how those numbers will change?
Yeah, you can. It becomes more complicated. You can, absolutely. It becomes more complicated because you start to think, okay, well, what are the sorts of future projection variables that we want to change? Tides are certainly one of the easier ones to change, but more difficult are expected precipitation differences, how detention in the basin is going to change as development happens based on the county and the city have different regulations as to what's going to happen to that detention, so how that gets routed down. Decisions that we make as a nation of how we're going to change with CO2 emissions and how that's going to affect precipitation and global. I mean, those things become challenging, but you can make estimates, and there are global climate models that you can disseminate information down to a local scale and make those projections and do that.
So you can get that done before 6 o'clock.
Call my wife.
Okay, so we have
I got one thing I could add.
one last.
Farmers Collective, their real concern is too also to where this berm might be made. They're not against the berm, but where it's going to be made is the saturation behind the type of soil that's down in that area. It takes, when it's flooded, it takes forever to dry out. So you, like these new wetland mitigations, I don't know if there's any tests that have been run on saturation before you put the new berm in or the new wetland behind it. I've heard quite a few comments about it's weather, but I don't know that for a fact. Is there any testing done on that?
That's I don't know. It's outside of what I do. I know you're spot on. The foundation of the levee would have to be vetted thoroughly, but that's geotechnical engineering. It's not it's not my practice.
Okay. So I want to thank Chris and Sam for coming and presenting, and we went long too, so longer than they were planning. to be answering questions. So thank you for that.